All right, we are back. This is Inland Northwest Native News. I'm your host, Jeff Ferguson. Thank you once again for joining us. It's a great day to be Indigenous. My co-host, Margo Hill. How you doing this morning, Margo?
Good morning. Squelks out there in Indian country.
All right, so we have some really good stories for you today. We have a lot of things that happened over the weekend. If this is your first time joining us, we would like to invite you to like and subscribe our page. We are coming up with new content. We're doing a morning show going live on YouTube three times a week, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. We're not quite to 4 times yet, but we'll be coming in at 8 o'clock, and we'll also be putting out some new episodes for our normal stuff. You know, we got some good content coming up from the Elmo and Arlie powwows from last year. I know there's a bunch of other stuff, but if you don't want to miss out on any of that, be sure to like and subscribe. If you have any questions or comments, be sure to leave them in the comment section below. With that being said, I don't know what you had in mind to talk about today, but I have a whole bunch of things, but I thought you might want to get going. I saw you had some pretty interesting stuff right there.
Well, you know, Jeff, it's a challenging time here in the Northwest and across the country. You know, COVID is really putting some stress and pressures on our communities. You know, I was out at the reservation to deliver some groceries yesterday, and yeah, my dad was pretty upset. You know, the big game, Gonzaga versus Baylor, you know, one of the most anticipated matchups, it didn't happen. It didn't happen. One of our Gonzaga, one of our Zags, you know, you graduated from Gonzaga. I graduated, got my law degree. You got your MBA from Gonzaga. You know, couldn't play because one of our players were sick. So here's the, you know, number one, number two team, biggest matchup, anticipated matchup, and they don't get to play because of COVID. So a little bit disappointing here.
Yeah, and I heard that. I think WSU canceled the football game. I know it's far and wide, and it's here. And it's now, and we have been really having to try to deal with it. You kind of funny you brought that up. I have a whole segment here, a couple different articles on COVID. First thing I wanted to point out, we had the Navajo Nation's Health Department Director, Dr. Jill Jim was appointed to Biden's advisory board from the Navajo Nation. I thought that was pretty exciting. There was an article that was published on that, and I will leave that in the description below. I'll leave links to all the articles and everything that we talk about in the description in the description below. Again, if you have any questions or comments, feel free to post them. You can post them live and we can see them. So feel free to chime in if you like. Moving right along, we have, before I move along, let me ask you this. Dr. Jill Jim of the Navajo Nation's Health Department put on Biden's advisory board. So one of the questions that's come up over and over again when Indian people are placed in positions of power, especially if they're from the reservation, especially if they have a limited amount of experience at a national level, do they really have the insight to oversee or to be advising somebody at a federal level? What do you think about this, Dr. Jim? Do you think she has the qualifications to be able to do this? Or sometimes, you know, I've also heard that it's Indian people have a different insight that is really helpful. You know, from the outside looking in, a lot of times it's hard to get natives at the table. And so now she has a seat at the table, and it can open up a lot of insight. What do you think about that?
So I think that was actually the point I was going to make, is that, you know, tribal people of color have a different perspective. You know, we heard some, you know, crazy statistics of folks on the Navajo Nation that didn't have electricity, that didn't have running water. They just, you know, they're off the grid. They're traditional people. And we don't think of anybody in America like that. And so when we think about COVID and fighting this invisible monster, you know, the Navajo people are very traditional people. In fact, this summer they put on a workshop, you know, resiliency and using cultural traditions to fight COVID. And so they're doing some great things in their community. It's just hit them really hard.
You know, the next article I have right here, Navajo Nation extends lockdown due to dire surge. Now they just did this. So this is a brand new, December 7th. That's about as new as you're going to get. just came out, NPR today. If you don't have the link, I'll leave it in the link or description below. But when we start looking at lockdowns, here locally, I know that the Spokane Res, they have a stay-at-home order currently that was put into place last week. That's really close to home here. And for some of us, when we start looking at this, I've heard over and over again. A close relative of mine told me that, oh well, all that coronavirus stuff is going to go away as soon as the election's over. And unfortunately, now we have friends, family that are in the hospital. It's no joke. We've had multiple people that we knew. Some of them has taken a long time, 4, 5, 6 weeks to recover from this. It's not just a common cold. It's not just something that you can play around with. And unfortunately, in Indian country, when we look at the life expectancy is already shorter than the rest of the United States. And in a lot of communities, especially on the Spokane Indian Reservation, we have had a substantial impact to our elders. We don't have nearly as many elders as we should, and that was because of the uranium and cancer and things of that nature, the radon, things along that lines. But as Indian people, that's where we get our knowledge, is from our elders. And if this stuff gets into our elder population, we better be prepared. That's all I got to say. I know it's hit you. What do you think? What are some suggestions that people could do? I know locking down is one option, but it's really hard to do.
Well, COVID is real, Jeff, and as you mentioned, I've got relatives in the hospital. Shout out to my cousin Arlene. She's fighting COVID. Just our prayers go out to her. Hopefully her body's fighting and strong. But folks, we've got to social distance. We've got to wear our masks. It's really hard as tribal people to not gather. But at the holidays, we didn't have anybody over. We had typically we'll have 30, 40 people over for Thanksgiving or Christmas, and we're just not doing that this year. As hard as that is, we're kind of trying to stay in our little bubble, and not cause any spread of the coronavirus ourselves.
Yeah, I know it's really tough. There's a lot of setbacks that Corona has put in place, and that's something that we're just really trying to have to deal with, and we try to deal with that together. We'll get through this together. One thing I wanted to mention, the American Indian Community Center here in Spokane has a program set up. If you have anybody that's elderly or shut in, or somebody that needs somebody to talk to, just someone to visit with them, they have. I know some people that they've pulled on with some of the coronavirus money that came out. They're able to fund people to call up and check on different people to make sure that they're doing okay, and maybe visit with them a little bit for some of the elders that don't get out as much or live in remote places. So I thought that was really cool. Can you talk a little bit about that? Do you know about that?
Yeah. So as part of the CARES Act, the American Indian Community Center has funding. And they have folks on the line, tribal folks that you can talk with. I don't have the number, but we'll post it, and we'll get you some more information about that. Just someone, we're some of us, we live alone, but we're used to going to work and seeing folks, so it doesn't, it doesn't bother us if we live alone. But if you live alone and you're not going to work, sometimes you just need somebody to talk to. And we've got a number for that at the Indian Center.
Yeah, it should, really help you from going stir crazy. I know it can be tough with these extended periods of time where you're not going to social events. We didn't do any powwows this whole season. Yeah. The chicken dance was at the very end of the season was something that people said that they really needed, something along that line. So that was good. So moving right along, back again, I don't want to keep going back to COVID, but this is another article today in NPR, and this one is first doses of COVID vaccine to be administered this week in the UK. Not here in this country, but in the UK. The reason I kind of brought that up, I was thinking about this, but when the different countries are putting in their pre-orders, to get the vaccines, it appears that the United States has put in an order for 1 billion doses. 1 billion doses. We only have 338 million people in the United States. from the 2019 census. What are we going to do with 1 billion doses of vaccine?
I don't know. I know that I heard that there's multiple, you have to take it a couple of times, dosages. So I'm not sure if that's if they're referring to, or we'll have to check that out and find out get some insight on that.
Yeah, we'll have to check that out. So anyhow, moving right along, we have some local things that came up. I'm going to get to this one here in a minute, but I do want to talk about this. This came out in the Seattle Times. Tire dust. And I'll leave, again, links in the description. Tire dust killing coho salmon returning to Puget Sound. Now, this is a very extensive article, and it was based on some research that was done over an extended period of time from a handful of universities, a handful of different organizations, but it was really fascinating. I don't know if you can have access, or if you can get access to this, or you have to subscribe to the Seattle Times to see the video on it, but it's really interesting. This article talks about all of the runoff water that goes into Puget Sound, and they did a study. They found out that the runoff water is just this, they call it a soup of chemicals. It's about 2,000 different chemicals that are going right into Puget Sound, and they were trying to figure out, was the chemical composition that was killing the salmon coming from the runoff, and if it was it a combination of the different chemicals, or was it one chemical? And over an extended period of time, they were able to find out that it boiled down to one chemical called quinine. The quinine is, it's in the dust, and it's actually an antioxidant. It's a tire preservative. So, and the thing, they said a few things in here. They said that it kills up to 40% of the returning salmon coming into Puget Sound, which is astronomical, 40%. That's crazy. And then they said that there's not a tire on the planet that's made without this stuff. So all tires contain this. It's an antioxidant that's added to the rubber to make the tires last longer, and it becomes dust. You know, as we're driving, the wear on the tires becomes dust. It wears on the road, washes into Puget Sound, and it's wiping out the salmon. And so that begs to ask the question, what are we going to do about this? You know, here we have this, you know, these tiny particles. We have thousands of miles of roadway that goes and washes into Puget Sound and other, but this just talks about Puget Sound. It doesn't talk about the impact on other species. It doesn't talk about the impact in other parts of the world. You know, the North Atlantic salmon, or in Asia, or any of these other places. It just talks about Puget Sound. I'm sure it's a lot more widespread problem than what you're talking about. What do you think about that?
That's really concerning, Jeff. You know, I work in transportation. I travel back to the National Academy of Sciences Transportation Research Board, and this is really something that we're going to have to work on. As an attorney, you know, I've worked in litigation on water quality standards, on water adjudication. Here in Washington, we have the culvert case. We're doing everything we can to protect our salmon, you know, and here it is, a substance that, you know, all of us use. We drive around. If it's in every one of our tires, that's really concerning. That it's taken this long to identify and isolate this one chemical, quinine, that is threatening our salmon. That's really concerning.
It says that they gasp to the surface of the water. Soon they can't swim, then they die. Says it's killing between 40 and 90%. That's crazy. I'm going to definitely leave a link to this one in the description. But the numbers one quick number that I wanted to talk about, I'll see if I can see it here real quickly. I think they said there was, oh, here we go. 3.1 billion tires globally produced annually for 1.4 billion vehicles. 1.4 billion vehicles, and they are all shedding this tire dust that's all getting washed into our waterways. That's crazy. And it doesn't matter. It says any vehicle is implicated, whether it's gas powered or electric, privately owned or transit. If it's got a tire and it moves on the road, it's part of the problem. That's just crazy. So we'll definitely have to keep an eye on that. Hopefully they'll come up with some solutions to try to figure out what's going on with that. But man, you know, that's just one of a handful of things. And this other article I have here that's local, this came off of the Columbia River Keeper, off their website, and it's oil leaks from the dams. Now, there was an oil spill at the Dalles Dam, and it reported a 200-gallon oil spill into the Columbia River. Now, I was reading through the comments on this, and it talked about the impact that this could make, but one of the comments on there, I was just like, this is crazy. If you look at, so 200 gallons. So one of the comments said, my hot tub is 250 gallons. This is only 200 gallons. Well, I also read a while back that a tablespoon of oil contained 1,000 gallons of water. Now, if you take a tablespoon, how many tablespoons are there in a gallon? And you multiply that times 200. And you don't just take that, but you have to take the added compound effect, because if we look at the Columbia River is the waterway that so many of the salmon in the Northwest, especially in the inland Northwest, they go up. Then we're looking at not only oil spills, we have to look at the heavy metals and the pollution that came down from 100 years of mining from North Idaho at the headwaters of the Spokane River. We have to look at the wastewater being contributed to the Spokane River from the city of Spokane, from the city of Liberty Lake, from Coeur d'Alene. Then we look at the Midnight Uranium Mine that feeds into the Spokane arm of Lake Roosevelt, which is a tributary of the Columbia River. And then we go further upstream to Canada, into Tecominco, who's been dumping sludge into the Columbia River for over 100 years. And then we go downstream to Hanford, who not only had the stuff coming up off the surface, but now has their storage units that are leaking, seeping into the Columbia River. That all goes out into our waterways, and we are lucky we have any salmon anymore because of all of this, aside from all the other species that are impacted. The oil dam, this is just, just kind of scratches the surface, but it goes to say, back towards the removal of the dams. When are we going to get to the point where we don't have to rely on dams anymore? So I'm sorry. Go ahead. I know you have a lot. So go ahead.
No, just the cumulative effects of those toxins are really hard on our fish. We have scientists at UCUT, Upper Columbia United Tribes, and CRIPVIC that are working. The lower United Tribes that are also working. The Umatillas, the Yakimas. All of those folks, we have scientists that are working really hard for water quality, and hopefully that we can bring those salmon up. For the Colvilles and Spokanes, they only come as far as Chief Joe Dam, and we have some Colville fishermen that fish there, but it's challenging when you have these toxins that are getting in the water.
Well, for those of you that aren't familiar, if you're new to this channel, we focus on issues locally, regionally, and nationally that affect the 11 tribes of the inland Northwest. As far west as the Colvilles, as far east as the Blackfeet, down to the Umatilla and Warm Springs in Oregon, and up to the Kootenai of Idaho, everybody in between, the Colvilles, the Yakimas, the Coeur d'Alenes, Spokanes, and this is an issue that we all share with the salmon. And when we talk about salmon, I know if you're not from this region, if you're not from this area, you might be, what's the deal with the salmon? What's the deal with the salmon? So in the Northwest, to the Interior Salish, Upper Columbia United Tribes, Interior Salish, Columbia Plateau Tribes, that was our sustenance. That was our monetary system. That was 70% of our diet on the Spokanes. And it's what we traded like money. It's what fed us. It was everything to us. It was like the buffalo to the Plains tribes. It was really that important. And when we lost that, here in this region, we lost all of that because of the dams. And the one kind of, the straw that broke the camel's back was Grand Coulee when they built that back in the 30s. And so we haven't had that in our culture for 80 plus years now. So that's kind of crazy. So we're trying to get that back. There's lots of efforts. Paulette Jordan said that she's making it her life goal to bring back salmon to North Idaho. And in order for us to do this, we have to have all of these things in place. The deforestation of the natural habitat of the salmon, that's something that we're going to have to deal with, because even if you put salmon out into the water and if you breed them into a fish hatchery and then you put them out in the river and they go down to the ocean, they come back. If that habitat's not conducive for them, if the water's too warm, if the nutrients aren't there, then they're not going to survive anyhow. So it's all of these things that are just a massive cluster of problems that we need to deal with, and they keep coming. The tires, the oil, the coal, that was another thing I didn't talk about. You have trains that go back and forth over the waterways, the Spokane River, the Columbia River, and as they turn, they drop coal into the water, and then they hit those bumps, they drop more coal into the water, and that coal is just outright toxic to fish, and it lasts a mighty long time. If you can imagine how long it takes a chunk of coal to dissolve in the water, it takes a long time, and it can kill a lot of fish. So there's all sorts of problems. But anyhow, that's all. There's whole other segments. I hope we can do some stories on that in the near to immediate future that are going to be interviews. It reminds me, if you guys have any interviews or you have any stories that you'd like us to cover, be sure to let us know. We were talking earlier about COVID. You talked a little bit about the CARES Act. On Wednesday, we're going to be covering some of the issues that tribes are facing with the monies that they got distributed to them from the federal government. So we're going to research a little bit of that. I know tribes are handling it all different. They're sovereign nations, and so that's kind of. I don't mean to ramble. I know you stuck a nickel in me this morning. Give me a cup of coffee, and here I am.
Yeah, so. There you go. So tribes are exercising their sovereignty across Indian country. Jeff and I work with a lot of folks in gaming, in the environment. One way that tribes have been exercising their sovereignty with regards to the water and water quality and the environment is water quality standards. I served as the attorney for the Spokane tribe, and we applied for treatment as a state under the Clean Water Act, and we are downstream from the city of Spokane, so we have set our water quality standards higher than a lot of companies that have NPDES permits would like. The Spokane tribe has been fighting hard for clean water. The river in Twet, we get our names from the salmon, Swinquamena, our people. And so we stand with tribes in the region under UCUT and try to exercise our sovereignty in a way that benefits everybody. Clean water is good for everybody.
True, very true. The many Wachoni, water is life. You can't do anything without water. It's just as important as air, as food to us. And so it is important. I once said that, if we look at how these massive corporations, they make all this money off of stolen land, stolen natural resources, and then they turn around and profit off of it, and then they leave us polluted water. When it's all said and done, the only people that are going to be able to afford to drink clean water are the people polluting it. If you think about that, if they're making all this money off it, and a bottle, what's a bottle of water now? $1. Some places you go, $2. If you're buying Fiji, it's like $4. Holy cow, can you imagine that? I remember growing up as a kid, I think it was my uncle told me, watch out, one day the price of water will be higher than the price of gasoline. And I was like, whatever. But if you take if you buy a big bottle, a quart, you buy a quart for $1, well, there's 4 quarts in $1. That's $4 a gallon. It's already higher than the price of gasoline. So, that's ongoing. That's something that we need. And it's tribes' independent right to exercise their sovereignty when they go out of their way to create things like the water quality standards that the Spokane tribe created. And there's a slew of other policies out there that tribes create. And being able to be at that forefront, in this upcoming administration, we have so many people of color that are already in the cabinet that have already been appointed. It's going to be, I think we're going to see some big changes very quickly. I think we're going to end up back as part of the Paris Climate Summit. Mm-hmm. I think we're going to end up creating new policies that are going to be really hard to undo. One of the first things that the last administration did was they approved the Dakota Access Pipeline. It's been 4 years now. 4 years. If you could think about that, since Standing Rock, when everybody went out there, and the Dakota Access Pipeline, those guys were out there with their rubber bullets and their pepper spray and gas and all that other stuff. But it's been 4 years, and they were talking something crazy like 500,000 barrels a day. That's a lot of oil to go through there. And if they've been doing that for the last 4 years, they have their money back. They didn't lose any money on this deal. I don't know how long they're going to allow them to endanger that waterway. We'll have to see, huh?
So I don't know if you have any more news stories, but I just wanted to chat with, we've been looking at Yellowstone. It's a production on Peacock is where we're watching it live stream, and it's just interesting to see the representations of Native Americans in mainstream media. You know, it's a big production. You know, we only have about 3 or 4 minutes left to keep it on time, Jeff. So I just, what are your thoughts about, you know, Yellowstone is a big production with Kevin Costner. They have lots of Native American stories woven into the storyline. You know, they're talking about MMIW. You know, of course, there's the stereotypical Indians and casinos kind of storyline. But they're clashing with developers and ranchers. Big stories out of Montana, and so I was just curious. You know, you're a communications major. You think a lot about media, and what are your thoughts about Yellowstone?
I'm glad you asked. I think it's a double-edged sword. When we look at this, and that really kind of leads me into this next segment I want to talk about real quick. I know you said we had 3 or 4 minutes, but that's the great thing about the internet. Hey, no, I'm just kidding. So I'm not going to drag this out. When you look at productions like that, it's a double-edged sword. Yeah, it's really good that these things are coming to light. That, you know, one of the issues they talk about, the missing and murdered Indigenous women. They talk about development. They talk about casinos. They talk about all these land issues and water. Water was an issue in one of the episodes. All these different things that Indian people have been dealing with for so long, and to bring them to the forefront and introduce some of these issues to an audience that may not know anything about this. You know, you can travel coast to coast, and if you don't know where you're going, you don't know whose land you're on, you don't know which reservation you're going through, you may not understand what's going on out there. You know, especially when you look and you go through these vast, big, open pieces of land like there are through Montana or through the Dakotas. And so, yeah, I think it's good that these issues are coming to light. But then again, it's also a very fine line between perpetuating the stereotyping of Indian people and actually, you know, doing the right thing. And I just hope that they have some good advisory as far as the scripting. I know some of it has kind of been a little edgy, but I also know, again, it's one of those things where at least we have some representation. You know, I want to talk to you about this. This is a great segue into this next. I wanted to say, I had a couple things. Great shout out to the new subscribers. I wanted to say thank you for joining us. But I want to go back to a couple of the comments that we've received on the YouTube channel page. One of them said just the other day, I'll go back even further. One of the first ones that I got was that, now this is, I'll do this one first and then we'll go to the next one. This is from Binko Benev, and this was 5 months ago. It says, why aren't you dressed as a native Indian? Why do you use the internet? And why were Mesoamericans much more developed than your ancestors? So at first when I read that, I was like, well, I'm sure you can imagine how I felt when I read that. I was just like, and I thought about it, and I thought about it, and you know, I was really frustrated, and I was really kind of, I was offended. I was really, really offended. You know, I'm a Spokane tribal member. You're a Spokane tribal member. We have other types of native blood in us. But it was, at first it was infuriating to me, but then I started thinking, and I thought, you know, this particular post here is in broken English. And I started thinking, you know, if growing up, when I grew up in Spokane, one of the reasons I do what I do, one of the reasons I got into communication is because growing up in Spokane, I was in private schools. And I remember in 7th grade, I opened up my Washington State history book and there was one sentence about the Spokane tribe in there. One sentence. In Washington State, we have 29 federally recognized tribes. And here, where they're teaching it, in my school, they could only give my tribe one sentence. And I thought, you know, if this person read anything like what I read in grade school or even on through high school in another country, then I could totally understand why they would think this way. You know, we are in the 21st century, and this internet thing is a great, you know, that's a great question. Why are you using the internet? Well, you know, typically people think, and I'm going to use this story. I'm going to go back and I'm going to use Mary Verner. She's an amazing person. She was a former mayor here in Spokane, and a few years back we had the opportunity to film her in a lecture series called Sovereignty Through Sustainability. And she told the story of when she first was hired by the Spokane tribe She was coming from the East Coast, and she came in to Spokane, coming down I-90 going west, and she got to the state line at Washington, Idaho, and she stopped there at the visitor center. And she went into the visitor center and she said, "Excuse me, I'm looking for the Spokane Indian Reservation. I got hired by them and I want to go report for work." And the people in the Indian Center at the state line there looked at each other and said, "We have Indians here?" If that's the kind of thing that we are battling, just to be recognized, and that's another thing that they talk about in going back to your Yellowstone, invisibility. We battle invisibility all the time. And if this guy that posted this, if we're as invisible to, how could they know? If you're reading a book, if they're teaching and they've perpetuated that history in this country, what are they? Can you imagine what they're teaching in other countries? And I started thinking about that. But then again, I started thinking too, a lot of times I meet people from other countries, and they're really curious about our culture, about Indian people. And so I talk with them, and they always, so often they end up becoming one of our greatest allies. They hear our stories, and they're like, "Oh man," and they're empathetic, and then they come out and they help volunteer at the American Indian Community Center, or we see them come out to the powwows, and they're buying up stuff from our vendors, and helping us socioeconomically. They come to the art shows. They do all sorts of different things, but they become really good allies. And so I just I wanted to point that out. Yeah, we may not dress the way we used to, but yeah, we have internet access, and internet's been a problem in Indian country, especially now during COVID. So I'm sorry. I, again, apologize, but I thought that was an important segment.
So, Jeff, you and I have had the opportunity to travel around the world, Italy, Greece, China, Mongolia. We've had the opportunity to travel. And I can tell you that, many years ago when I was in college, many years ago, it sounds old, but I had the opportunity to travel to the Soviet Union, Russia, and Novosibirsk, Siberia, Leningrad, Moscow, the Red Square, it was amazing. And I got to tell you, people from other countries love American Indians. They always want to hear about our stories. They want to know about our culture. Of course, Russia at the time was a Red Scare kind of thing, and so they wanted they tell the story about American Indians because it's a bad spot on the American history. So lots of foreign folks really want to know about American Indians. I get asked lots of questions. But the reason we're doing this program is to tell our own stories, that we are still here. We are modern Americans. We practice our culture. We live right here in the inland Northwest and across the region. So we came here, we show up for this program, Inland Northwest Native News, to tell your story, what's happening in Indian country, what's important to you. If there's a law clerk job at the Yurok tribe, which there is, but I was reading on Turtle Talk this morning, which I highly recommend. Turtle Talk provides the Indian law and news across Indian country, but they have a clerk position at the Yurok tribe, spring, summer, fall, the Office of Tribal Attorneys. So, we want to talk about news that's really important to you. And this is an opportunity to do that. So we'll be talking a little bit about entertainment news. Indians love Seahawks. The Seahawks lost yesterday to the Giants, 17-12. So there's a little bit of a bummed out nation, 12th man in Indian country. But we're true to the Seahawks, so we'll keep rooting for them. But there's a lot of things happening in Indian country, and so we're going to do our best to bring you entertainment news, to bring you personal stories. We also want to give a shout out to Leanne Campbell. She's one of our dear friends. She did some of your beadwork, Jeff. She was recently hospitalized, but Chuck took good care of her, and now she's home. So we just want to give a shout out to Leanne from the Coeur d'Alene tribe, and appreciate our tribal folks, our tribal community.
All right. Well, I talked a little bit about a few different things today. The one last thing I want to touch on, be careful. COVID's out there. It's going to be around. We might have doses in the works. They say maybe December, maybe January, maybe February. It's going to be a while, but just take care of yourself and your family. We want you to be here. We want to see you around at the different powwows, coming out to dance or sing. It's something that we're just going to have to get through. But we'll try to help you get through this. We have some exciting stuff from things that we had shot before that I'm going to be trying to get out at least another episode of two per week, aside from the live streams that we're doing every day. So just hang in there. There are brighter futures. This too shall pass. I keep seeing that. This too shall pass. So hang in there. Yeah.
So
definitely.
wear your mask, wash your hands, social distance. I really am excited about some of the episodes that were recorded last year. We have Iron Woman Jingle Dress coming up, interviews with some of those gals that competed. We've got Indian ventriloquists out from Flathead Lake, Francis Ald, and we're going to try to get to those stories. We had lots of recordings that we completed, that Jeff worked on, and we're excited to show you.
And if you haven't seen it, just on Friday, we posted Inchelium Days with Tony Louie. That was awesome. If you want something that's going to make you feel better, check that out. It's on our YouTube channel. It's episode 12. Tony Louie was, and man, he's just an amazing Colville tribal member. He's I guess he was Jim Boyd's nephew, is that right? Yeah, so he does some Jim Boyd songs. He does some of his own that turned out really, really nice. Singer songwriter. This was done a little over a year ago, and I know since then he won a NAMI. He got a NAMI for one of his music videos. But if you want something to make you feel better, check that out, man. Holy cow, that guy can sing. So
do they just search it up on YouTube, Inland Northwest Native News, or
Inland Northwest Native News? Okay. You can check that out. I'll leave links in the description on this as well. But that being said, we covered a lot today, and I don't want to drag your day out too bad. Happy Monday,
One of my nieces from Inchelium, one of the Signer girls, or Dick girls rather, said, "Hey, this is exactly the medicine I needed." So check out Tony Louie, a live recording. He's singing songs, and you can just see the community dancing and the kids playing. Stem-Ospa'us playground is in the background, and so kids are just playing. Just takes us back to summer days, and we didn't get a lot of that this year, so enjoy.
Thank you once again for joining us. We'll see you on Wednesday.